never meant to find it. That's what I keep telling myself as I sit here, hands trembling, staring at the document that would change everything. My name is Rebecca Winters, and until 3 weeks ago, I was just another mid-level financial analyst at Criterion Capital, a respectable investment firm in Chicago. Respectable. The irony of that word makes me want to laugh now. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when it happened. The office had emptied out except for a few workaholics and those of us preparing for the Morgan acquisition, a deal that would cement our CEO's reputation and potentially double our annual profits. I'd been assigned to the due diligence team, which meant late nights poring over spreadsheets, financial projections, and risk assessments. "Rebecca, I need the liability assessment documents on my desk before Davidson arrives tomorrow morning," James Herrick, my boss, had said before rushing out to another emergency meeting. This was the third one this week. He looked unusually tense, his normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes darting around the office as he spoke to me. "They're not quite finished yet," I replied. "I can email them to you tonight." "No," he snapped, then softened his tone. "No emails. Print them and leave them on my desk. I'll review them when I get back later tonight." That should have been my first clue that something was off. In our increasingly digital workplace, James insisted on handling certain documents only in hard copy. Around 9 p.m., I finished the assessment and headed to his office to deliver the printouts. The building was nearly silent, the overhead lights dimmed to their energy-saving evening mode. James's office door was slightly ajar, the desk lamp casting a warm glow across the mahogany furniture. I placed my documents in his inbox and was turning to leave when I noticed his desk drawer was partially open. A corner of a thick manila envelope peeked out, with the words, "Confidential, Morgan Acquisition," stamped in red. Thinking it might contain information I needed for my analysis, I pulled it out. Inside was a letter on Morgan Financial letterhead, dated just 2 weeks earlier. As I scanned the contents, my blood ran cold. As discussed, the inflated valuation figures should satisfy the board's concerns. Once the acquisition is complete, we can gradually write down the assets over the next 3 quarters, citing market instability. Herrick will ensure the transition team doesn't dig too deep during due diligence. My eyes fixated on a particular paragraph. The offshore accounts are prepared to process the consultant fees as discussed. $2. 4M will be transferred in 3 installments, following closure of the deal. Please destroy this letter after reading and confirm receipt through our usual channel. It was signed by William Davidson himself, the CEO of Morgan Financial. The letter referenced an attached document, a falsified valuation report that showed Morgan's assets at nearly double their actual worth. This wasn't just creative accounting or optimistic projections. This was fraud, deliberately designed to mislead shareholders and the board. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. This couldn't be real. James Herrick had always been tough but ethical. He'd built his reputation on integrity and sound financial judgment. He was being groomed to take over as CFO next year. Yet here was evidence that he was actively participating in a scheme to defraud both companies, apparently for personal gain. And I was on the due diligence team that was supposed to catch exactly this kind of deception. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly shoved the documents back in the drawer. But in my haste, I knocked over a stack of papers on his desk. As I scrambled to put them back in order, a security key card fell to the floor. Not a regular employee card, but one I'd never seen before, with a strange logo embossed on it. The footsteps grew louder. I pocketed the key card without thinking and hurried out the other door of his office, which led to a small conference room. Through the crack, I saw James return, accompanied by a man I recognized from photos as William Davidson. They closed the door behind them. I escaped through the conference room and returned to my desk, my mind racing. What had I just discovered? And what was I supposed to do about it? Report it to the SEC? Go to our compliance officer? Confront James directly? The key card felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out and examined it more closely. The logo belonged to Archer Storage Solutions, a company I'd never heard of. One thing was certain. I couldn't just ignore what I'd found. Too much was at stake. People's investments, retirement funds, jobs, all would be affected by this fraudulent acquisition. But speaking up would make me a target. These were powerful people with resources and influence, I gathered my belongings and left the office, feeling the weight of knowledge pressing down on me. My apartment, usually a sanctuary after long workdays, felt exposed and vulnerable that night. I checked the locks twice, then sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine, trying to think clearly. By morning, I had made my decision. I would gather more evidence before going to the authorities. I needed to be certain, and I needed to protect myself. The keycard might lead somewhere, and I had access to the financial data that could prove the discrepancies. Little did I know that my discovery was just the beginning, the first thread that, when pulled, would unravel a conspiracy far larger than I could have imagined, putting not just my career, but my life in danger. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The office was quiet, with only the cleaning staff finishing their rounds. I went straight to my computer and began digging through the Morgan acquisition files, looking for discrepancies that would confirm what I'd read in that letter. It didn't take long to find them. The projected earnings were wildly optimistic, based on contracts that, according to our database, didn't actually exist. Asset valuations were inflated across the board. Most concerning was a portfolio of properties that Morgan claimed were worth $340 million, but appeared to be worth less than half that based on recent market assessments. I copied key files to an encrypted drive, careful not to leave traces of my search. By the time other employees started arriving, I had what I needed: clear evidence that the numbers didn't add up. James arrived looking refreshed and confident, nothing like the nervous man from yesterday. He stopped by my desk. "Did you leave those documents on my desk last night?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I finished them around 9. He studied my face for a moment. "Good work. The meeting with Davidson went well. It looks like we're on track to close this deal by the end of the month." I nodded, afraid to say more, and he continued to his office. As soon as he was gone, I took an early lunch break. I needed to find out what that keycard opened. Archer Storage Solutions turned out to be a high-security storage facility on the outskirts of Chicago. I drove there, not entirely sure what I was doing or what I'd find. The facility was surrounded by a tall fence with security cameras mounted at regular intervals. I approached the entrance, where a bored-looking guard sat in a small booth. I swiped the keycard at the gate, half expecting alarms to sound. But instead, the guard glanced at his screen, nodded at me, and the gate opened. Inside, I followed the directions on a small screen that activated when I swiped the card again at a kiosk. Unit 247, Level B. The storage unit was small, about the size of a walk-in closet. Inside were several file boxes, labeled by year, and a laptop. I started with the most recent box and found folders full of bank statements for accounts in the Cayman Islands, correspondence with offshore entities, and what appeared to be records of payments to various individuals, some with names redacted. One name that appeared repeatedly was Senator Thomas Keller, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and a vocal advocate for deregulation in the financial sector. According to these records, he had received consulting fees totaling over $1.5 million in the past 2 years. I took photos of the most damning documents with my phone, then turned to the laptop. It was password protected, but I noticed a small notebook beside it with what looked like password hints. After a few attempts, I was in. The laptop contained spreadsheets tracking what appeared to be bribes paid to regulators, politicians, and even journalists, all disguised as consulting fees or speaking honoraria. There were also draft press releases for the Morgan acquisition, dated for various scenarios over the next month, and contingency plans for potential regulatory hurdles. I was so engrossed in what I was finding that I lost track of time. When I finally checked my watch, I realized I'd been gone for nearly 2 hours. I quickly copied key files from the laptop onto my encrypted drive, carefully replaced everything as I had found it, and left the storage facility. On the drive back to the office, my phone rang. It was Melissa from HR. "Rebecca, James has been looking for you. He seemed upset that you weren't at your desk." "I had a doctor's appointment," I lied. "I'm on my way back now." "Well, hurry. There's an all-hands meeting at 3 p.m. about the Morgan acquisition." When I arrived, James was waiting by my desk. "Where were you?" he demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Doctor's appointment," I repeated, meeting his gaze steadily. "I left a note with Sarah." "I didn't see any note," he said. but seemed to accept the excuse. I need you to revise the risk assessment for the Morgan deal. Davidson wasn't satisfied with some of the projections. The projections are based on the data they provided, I said carefully. If they're not happy with them, perhaps they should review their own numbers. Something flashed in his eyes, anger, maybe, or suspicion. Just make the changes I marked, and be at that meeting at 3. The all-hands meeting was led by our CEO, Gregory Pierce, with James and several other executives seated beside him. They announced that the Morgan acquisition was moving forward ahead of schedule, with a formal announcement planned for Monday. There was talk of synergies and market opportunities, expansions and efficiency gains. Nothing about inflated valuations or offshore payments. As I looked around the room at my colleagues, good, hard-working people who had no idea what was really happening, I felt a surge of anger. They deserved better than to be unwitting accomplices to fraud. After the meeting, I stayed late again, this time to compile everything I'd found into a comprehensive report. If I was going to expose this, I needed to be thorough and methodical. I was just finishing when my computer screen suddenly went black. Then it rebooted, showing only a message. Security alert. Unauthorized access detected. System locked. My heart raced as I tried to restart it, but nothing worked. Then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Storage unit breach detected. Security protocols initiated. They knew. Somehow they knew I had been in that storage unit. I grabbed my bag with the encrypted drive and headed for the exit, only to find James waiting by the elevator. "Working late again, Rebecca?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes hard. "Just finishing up some things," I replied, trying to sound normal. "Dedication. I've always appreciated that about you." He stepped closer. "That's why I'm confused about your activities today. Care to explain why you accessed files you had no business looking at?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, backing away slightly. "I think you do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like my security access log. "You've been searching through the Morgan files all morning, files unrelated to your assigned tasks. I needed to get out of there. I was being thorough. If you'll excuse me, I'm late for dinner plans." As I tried to step around him, he grabbed my arm. "Rebecca, you're a smart woman. Don't throw away your career over misplaced concerns. Whatever you think you found, I assure you there's an explanation." I pulled away. "I'm sure there is, and I'm sure the SEC will be very interested in hearing it." His face hardened. "That would be a serious mistake. People who interfere with deals like this tend to face consequences. Professional, legal. Sometimes personal." The threat was unmistakable. I managed to keep my voice steady. "Are you threatening me, James? I'm advising you. As someone who has always looked out for your best interests." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Think carefully about your next move." The elevator arrived, and I stepped in, my heart pounding. As the doors closed, I saw him take out his phone. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel using cash and spent the night organizing my evidence and preparing to contact the authorities. By morning, I had a complete dossier ready to submit to the SEC, the FBI, and select journalists I trusted. But before I could send anything, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Rebecca, there are men here asking about you. They say they're from your company's security team, but they're scaring me." The blood drained from my face. "Mom, don't tell them anything. I'm on my way." They had found my mother. This had escalated beyond anything I had anticipated. It was time to act. I arrived at my mother's suburban home to find her shaken but unharmed. The men had left after asking questions about my whereabouts, claiming there had been a security breach at work involving my credentials. "They weren't from your company, were they?" she asked, perceptive as always. "No, Mom. I'm involved in something complicated." I gave her a sanitized version of the truth, that I'd discovered financial irregularities and was planning to report them. "I need you to go stay with Aunt Carol for a few days, just to be safe. I'm not running away from my own home because some corporate thugs think they can intimidate me," she said, steel in her voice. "But you need to be careful, Rebecca. These people play by different rules." She was right. I hadn't fully appreciated the lengths to which they might go to protect themselves. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about freedom. If what I'd found became public, People like James and Davidson could face serious prison time. After ensuring my mother was safe and secretly arranging for a friend to stay with her, I headed to the Chicago field office of the FBI. I had decided that sending my evidence electronically was too risky. They could be monitoring my communications. The agent who took my initial statement seemed skeptical until I showed him the photos and files I'd collected. His demeanor changed quickly. "Ms. Winters, these allegations are extremely serious," he said, leading me to a more private conference room. "We'll need to verify everything, of course, but if this is accurate, you've uncovered a significant case of financial fraud and possibly corruption." For the next 4 hours, I walked 2 agents through everything I'd found: the letter, the storage unit, the falsified valuations, the payments to Senator Keller and others. They were particularly interested in the political connections, which elevated the case beyond mere financial fraud. "We'll need to move quickly," the lead agent, Torres, said after conferring with his colleagues. "Once they realize you've come to us, they'll start destroying evidence." "They already know I've found something," I told him. "My computer was locked remotely yesterday, and someone sent men to question my mother." Torres's expression darkened. "We'll arrange protection for both of you. In the meantime, we need to keep your cooperation confidential while we prepare warrants." I left the FBI office with a new burner phone and instructions to maintain my normal routine as much as possible while they built their case. It felt surreal to return to work the next day, to sit at my desk and pretend nothing had happened. James was unusually friendly, stopping by several times to check on my progress with the revised risk assessment. Each time he would casually mention how excited everyone was about the Morgan deal and what it would mean for the company's future. "We're all going to benefit from this, Rebecca," he said during one such visit. "The board has approved substantial bonuses for the acquisition team. That includes you. The bribe was as transparent as it was insulting." "That's generous," I replied noncommittally. "We take care of our own," he said, the underlying message clear. For 3 days, I maintained the charade, providing the FBI with updates and additional information as they requested it. They had obtained warrants for the storage facility and were monitoring James and Davidson. Senator Keller had been placed under surveillance as well. On the 4th day, everything changed. I arrived at work to find the office in chaos. FBI agents were everywhere, seizing computers and documents. James was being led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury. When he saw me, he lunged against his restraints. "You," he shouted, "you did this. You have no idea what you've done." Agent Torres intercepted him, and James was escorted to the elevator. Other executives were being questioned in conference rooms. Employees stood in shocked clusters, whispering and watching the scene unfold. I was taken to a secure area where Torres explained the situation. We moved up our timeline. Davidson got spooked and tried to access the storage unit last night to remove documents. We had it under surveillance and took him into custody. Once that happened, we had to move on all targets simultaneously. What followed was a whirlwind of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings. The story broke in the media the next day, with headlines about massive financial fraud and political corruption. Senator Keller announced he was taking a leave of absence to address these baseless allegations. The Morgan acquisition was halted, and both companies' stocks plummeted. I was placed in a temporary witness protection program as the case proceeded. The threats began almost immediately. Anonymous calls, emails from untraceable accounts, a brick through my mother's window with a note that read simply, "Not over." The pressure was immense. Davidson's lawyers portrayed me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge for being passed over for promotion. James claimed I had planted evidence to discredit him. Senator Keller's office released a statement suggesting a deep state conspiracy to silence his advocacy for financial freedom, but the evidence was too substantial to dismiss. Other whistleblowers, emboldened by my actions, came forward with corroborating information. A junior executive at Morgan confessed to falsifying documents at Davidson's direction. An aide to Senator Keller agreed to testify about delivering cash payments. 6 weeks after the initial arrests, I was called to testify before a grand jury. As I entered the courthouse through a side entrance, surrounded by security, I saw a crowd of reporters and protesters outside. Some held signs supporting the corporate freedom fighters being persecuted by overzealous regulators. Others thanked the whistleblower who had exposed corruption. My testimony lasted 2 days. I recounted everything in meticulous detail, supported by the evidence I had gathered. The prosecutors were thorough, anticipating the defense strategies and closing potential loopholes. By the end, the grand jury had more than enough to issue indictments. James, Davidson, and 14 others were charged with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Senator Keller faced additional charges of accepting bribes and abusing his office. The case would take years to fully resolve, but the immediate impact was undeniable. Criterion Capital underwent a complete leadership overhaul. The board, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, appointed a new CEO known for ethical business practices and regulatory compliance. Morgan Financial was placed under administrative supervision while its finances were thoroughly audited. As for me, I couldn't return to my old life. My identity as the whistleblower became public when a journalist connected the dots and published my name. The threats continued, now joined by messages of support from strangers who saw me as some kind of hero. I received job offers from regulatory agencies and ethical investment firms, but I chose instead to join a nonprofit focused on financial sector reform and whistleblower protection. My experience had shown me how difficult and dangerous it was to speak truth to power in the financial world. Others needed the support I hadn't had. 3 months after that fateful night when I found the letter, I stood in a conference room at the SEC, addressing a group of financial professionals about the importance of ethical conduct and the protections available to those who report wrongdoing. The systems that enable corruption rely on our silence, I told them. They count on fear for our jobs, our reputations, our safety. But there's something more powerful than fear, and that's the truth. When you know something is wrong and choose to speak up, you're not just protecting investors or the market. You're protecting the very idea that our financial system can operate with integrity. After the presentation, a young analyst approached me. "I think there's something happening at my firm," she said quietly. "But I'm scared of what might happen if I say something." I recognized the fear in her eyes. The same fear I had felt standing in James's office with that letter in my hands. I gave her my card. "Call me," I said. "You don't have to face this alone." As she walked away, I thought about how a single discovery had altered the course of not just my life, but the lives of countless others. The corruption I'd exposed had affected thousands of investors and employees, distorted markets, and influenced legislation. The ripple effects would continue for years. I never set out to be a whistleblower or an advocate. I was just someone who couldn't look away when confronted with a wrong that needed to be made right. In the end, that's all integrity really is. The courage to act on the truth, whatever the cost. The investigation continues to expand, reaching into other firms and political offices. More evidence emerges daily of how deep the corruption ran. I still receive threats occasionally, but they no longer frighten me the way they once did. Because now I know something I didn't before. The truth may be inconvenient, even dangerous, but its power is undeniable. And when enough people stand up for it, no amount of money or influence can keep it hidden forever. That letter I found, the one that started everything, is now evidence in a federal case. But sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had walked out of that office without looking in that drawer. How many more people would have been harmed? How much longer would the corruption have continued? We all face moments that test our character and define who we are. Mine came in the form of a hidden letter and a choice about what to do with the knowledge it contained. I made my choice, and I would make it again. The fight for financial integrity continues. But now I'm on the front lines, helping others find their voice and their courage. And every time another whistleblower comes forward, every time another scheme is exposed, I'm reminded that the systems that enable corruption aren't invincible after all. They're only as strong as our willingness to remain silent, and I, for one, have found my voice.